my god, it's Atomic Monsoon!
Again? Already?
Already.
I feel like we just did one of these a week ago.
Same, and I feel like we've done... Oh, wait, it's also the end of July.
Oh, it is.
No.
Today's Thursday, July.
Yes.
What will the future hold for us?
Listening to Def M Records is what it holds for us.
You know, that is the thing that I forgot to do last week, is I forgot to thank our friends at Def M Records for providing our excellent intro and outro music. So thank you guys. That if you were listening last week when we were talking about Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue, I did say that there was something I forgot and it must not have been very important. Turns out it was the most important. It was thanking our friends. So
We just had a severe brain fart.
you know, summer is just brutal, especially here in the desert.
Yes.
So especially this year. Speaking of friends, we have a friend on the phone.
Hello?
Introduce him.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, how are you guys doing today?
Good. Tom Leveen is joining us. Tom is an author of, 9, 10, 15 books, something like that.
Something like that. Mm-hmm.
Award-winning author, and you've got a Kickstarter going on for a second edition of one of your books, and so we're gonna talk about that. But before we get into that, Tom, I want to say it's actually your fault that the Def M Records All-Stars do our intro music.
Oh, really? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so once upon a time, you and your wife and some friends used to own an arts venue called Cairo Arts.
Yes.
And on Halloween night 2007, you guys had a big Halloween event, and I was there. And I met the band The Dead Gear. And
Yes.
befriended those guys, and they ended up on Def M Records. And so through that friendship, we ended up with intro music to Atomic Monsoon. So thank you.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that's where you met. I knew you guys knew each other. I didn't realize it hadn't happened until then.
It was literally that night. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, they were a jamming band, so that's very good.
Yeah. And it turns out they've got 2 full albums and a couple EPs on defmrecords.com. So anyone that wants to know why I have friends or whatever can go check that out.
Andy, you have friends because you're a nice person.
I mean,
Yeah.
And you're fun to get along with.
Yeah.
I do try.
You're doing good, man.
All right. Thank you. And Tom, we've been friends for, that was 2007. You and I were friends at least a few years before that. So
Yeah, I think it might not be quite 20 years, but it's awful close. We're probably comfortably in the 15-year range right now, I would say.
it was somewhere between 2002 and 2004 for sure, because I know what I was doing in the rest of my life that time period. So
That sounds right. That sounds right.
Here we are. Tom, you wrote a book.
I did. So, yeah, we've got it's a whole big long thing, but the book in question today is my second published novel, Zero, which came out with Penguin Random House, an imprint of Penguin Random House back in 2012, and it was named one of the best books of the year by let me get this right, Young Adult Library Services Association, which is a division of the American Library Association, so it's a whole big acronym thing. But that was pretty cool. I was very happy to get that because that means they got it. They understood what I was going for. Technically speaking, it would be shelved in young adult. The thing about young adults is most young adults don't necessarily read it, or not at least the contemporary stuff, which is what this is. These days, if people say young adult, I think the inclination is to assume that it's fantasy, and Zero is definitely not that. This is a contemporary young adult literature, as they say.
Sure.
And it's set here in the Phoenix area in approximately 1992, 1993. So things are a little bit different. Not too different, but a little bit different. This is just when, everything in Seattle is starting to kind of work its way into the Phoenix area, all the music and everything. And you still had a little bit of punk aspect going in, but it's kind of starting to either fade or transition into what we eventually called grunge, And the main story is about a 17-year-old girl who has kind of taken this nickname Zero upon herself, which tells you a lot about her right up front. She is a visual artist. She's a painter, and she's just graduated high school and had plans to go to a very prestigious art school in Chicago, but was accepted but didn't get the money she needed. So now she's stuck in Phoenix going to community college and just kind of grousing about her life the way you do when you're 17. But then she meets a guy who's a drummer in an up-and-coming punk band, and things are never going to be the same after that. Having said that, it is not a romance. I don't think the fans I've got for this novel are not romance readers, because it doesn't hit the romance tropes at all. It's much more about her journey. He does not rescue her. I don't do that as a writer, and I'm not a fan of that. And most of the stuff that I read or watch, everything, she gets into her own trouble and she gets out of her own trouble just fine. Thank you. So yeah, that is the gist of it. And so it was published by Random House back in 2012. And the thing about that is when you sell a book, the publisher or whatever company it is buys the rights to that story, and then they can manufacture that story in however, whatever ways they see fit, depending on the rights that you sold them. Well, they pretty much bought all of the rights. They put out a hardcover, a paperback, an ebook, and then that was it. Nothing else came out. So I eventually was able to go in and get the rights they hadn't used back. So I could do audiobooks, and I could do, whatever else I want to do, comic books. I would love to do a comic book of this, because I think that'd be so much fun. And so now I've got those rights back, and I thought I want to put this out there to the small, loyal audience that I've kind of cultivated over the last several years, and see if we can get a second edition of the book put out that's going to have, like a preface and an afterword and some annotations and, maybe some art. I don't know, just all kinds of different things, and to see if we could breathe some new life into this, into the novel. So that's where we stand today.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I have one of the first editions of Zero, which you were kind enough to personalize when you signed it for me.
Thank you.
And so, I can tell you, you and the listeners, honestly, like, it's probably my favorite book of yours that I've read. I will admit, I'm, while we are good friends, Tom, I am not the best of friends. There are still a handful of your books that I haven't had time to read yet.
Well, me neither, so it's okay.
That's fair.
Oh yeah, you just got to buy them. You don't got to read them. You just got to buy them. That's all.
I mean, they're on the stack of things to read. It's just, I've been busy sitting at home watching a lot of cartoons.
Yes.
While we're all stuck at home.
It happens to all of us. You're not the only one.
Yeah,
especially
sure.
Authors are notorious for that, because we have all these author friends, and you're like, oh, cool, and you go and you buy the book, and you're like, yay, and like, that's just gonna sit there, dude. There's no way. Okay, this is number 30 in the list. I'll do my best.
Right.
But
yeah, no, for legitimately, Zero is my favorite book of yours that I've read. I missed the bus one time because I got so caught up reading it at a bus stop that the bus just went right past and didn't stop for me.
That is awesome. Thank you. That's about the highest praise I think I could get for a book. Well, what was it? Because I'm curious that since you said that, the other favorite thing that has happened to me with this particular book is I've got a fan who has literally read the hardcover to pieces, like the spine is just falling apart, and she's drawn in it and it's just a wreck,
Man.
And I think I hope I'm not making this part of the story up, but I feel like she came to an event several years ago and was like, I'm really sorry. And I was like, are you kidding? This is awesome. This is what anybody would want to see happen to their book. Like, you love it. That's tear it up,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Andy, what it was for you personally, if you can recall, like why did you miss the bus? Because I think I'm going to guess for me, while you think about a really cool answer to that, I think I'm hoping that it was the sincerity and the authenticity of the voice, that this is somebody you knew, whether it was her or yourself or somebody else, but like that it was so very realistic in the best possible way. Because that's how I feel about this particular book, having written several different things and in lots of different little subgenres of the category. Like, this one is like, no, this is what it feels like, dude. Like, this is 17. You know what I mean? So I'm curious.
So I don't remember exactly what part of the book I was reading when the bus blew past me. But I do, yeah, like you said, it was the authenticity. Like there's a lot of Zero that I saw, or a lot of me that I saw in her. The the not so popular art kid that wanted to go to the prestigious art college but couldn't afford to go. Ended up going to community college, right? The only thing I didn't get was a random drummer boyfriend over a summer.
Right.
But yeah, like there was just a lot of her struggles, a lot of her self-confidence issues, a lot of confidence in herself as an artist. Just a lot of that was just like, oh yeah, no, like that's me. That's all of us art nerds. Like all of us visual artists, like we all kind of go through a lot of the stuff that she went through. I don't know why, but it seems to me that a lot of artists tend to be poor when they're younger, or maybe a lot of poor people become artists. I don't know if that's 100% true, but at least in my circle of friends, that seems to be the case.
Sure.
So a lot of us are like, yeah, we spend all of our time making stuff, and then can't afford to go to school to make it. To like learn to make it better because we spent all of our money on supplies to make stuff in the first place.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. And that's, I think that's going to be true. We were talking before the show started with Steph about teaching technical theater, for example, right?
Yeah.
And that's my background is in theater. I've got 22 years of background as an actor and director here in town, and that most of it was on my dime, and we certainly weren't making a living at it. When we had Cairo Arts Venue in Scottsdale, we operated for 3 years, and we managed to not lose the house. Like that was my bar. Like don't go into so much debt. And we didn't. By the time we closed, we didn't owe any money. We'd paid all of our bills. We were debt free, and that was a great time to that was the metric. We weren't making any money. We weren't putting anything in the bank for ourselves, but we were keeping it open, which was great. And I think the stuff that you're talking about, Andy, is just so applicable to everybody. Like for me, I am not a visual artist. I took a couple of art classes and I bought some like charcoals and sketch paper and stuff to kind of get a sense like for research basically,
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm not an art. I can't. Like you could teach me all day long. I'm never going to have that thing that you have. But the feelings and the sensations and the mental stuff that we go through, I think is true for the actors and writers and poets and artists. Like all of us feel that same thing. There's a piece in the book either my agent or editor wanted just like a few paragraphs of what it felt like for Zero when she was painting. Like what does it feel like when she's painting, like deep down inside kind of thing, I was like, I don't know. I suck. I can't do that. So what I ended up doing, and it's a writing technique that I teach in my classes called emotional memory, which is actually also an acting technique that I learned, I don't know, however many years ago. Steph knows.
Yeah.
Where you take something that has happened to you and you kind of transplant it into the scene that you're writing or you're acting or whatever. So these couple of paragraphs where she's describing what it feels like when she gets lost in her painting, I'm describing what it felt like to be a director of a show and get a standing ovation for the cast, like what it felt like to be sitting in the back of the auditorium and watch that happen. Like this is what it feels like. Oh my God, it's just the greatest feeling ever, and kind of transposing that into the novel. But I think, like you're saying, Andy, I think it's so applicable to all of us who have these creative pursuits. I don't care if it's knitting. I don't care if it's, being a techie or being an artist, whatever it is. We have this same sort of, just this overall feel and life experience, it feels like.
Yeah. I definitely agree there that the emotional connection is definitely one that helps. Because I do a little bit of writing myself. I don't have anything published. My writing is just simply for my own enjoyment. But there have been times where I've connected it to the real world, and those are the chapters that I actually have the most detail and the most depth into compared to the random chapter where they're just having a conversation over coffee.
Yeah. But the truth is, I think, the hopeful truth is that we're all, I think if we're doing our jobs, we're doing whatever that act of creation is for ourselves, just like you're saying. I mean, I wrote the first draft of the book I wrote when I was 19, I think. So we're talking 1993, something like that. And I had just started community college and the whole, just like in the book, because that's what I knew. That's what was happening. And then doing the math, it took I think 19 years from the first draft of the novel to landing on bookstore shelves. So, and that whole time, or most of that time, I wasn't writing it or revising it because, like, I'm going to get this published at Random House. Like, no, it's fun. I just love the story and the characters, and let's see what happens next and that kind of thing. But I think the more we stick with that, the better the final product is, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have attempted writing.
Me too.
yeah, that's fair. Sometimes my stories end up pretty okay, and they end up becoming comics, and sometimes there's a great start or there's a great ending, and the middle doesn't happen, or, and it's just, but I don't, like in the same way, Tom, you were saying that you don't have that thing that I have to make visual art. I think I don't have that thing to tell stories that you have. And I don't think that that's bad. It's just, like we're all wired a little differently. So
that is true. I will agree with that. So I hate forcing, like, no, you are a writer. Like, no, okay, maybe you're not. That's okay. I will say though that we are all storytellers. Every person on Earth is a storyteller.
Okay. Yes.
In one shape or another. Now, and talking about comics, several years ago now, I got to work on 4 or 5 issues of Spawn, which was like, that was the best job I've ever had. No question. I still think so. But I had no knowledge of the form, and so got kind of thrown into the deep end, and just had to kind of make it up as I went. And so to craft a visual story in such relatively strict parameters. I mean, as a novelist, I can go as long as I want. I can make a door stopper. I can make a series. I can do whatever. But 20 to 24 pages or whatever of comic books with the art, and then the story, the dialogue, everything going in there. That is a whole other level of skill that I'm still working on. So difficult for me to do, but so much more fun.
Yeah, comics comics are weird. Writing for comics is weird, especially if you're going from long form, because it has to be a certain number of pages. It has to be formatted in such a way that the artist can read it and understand it. And you need to make sure that you're not telling your artist to draw 2 things at once in a panel, which I don't know if you had that issue, but I've definitely had some people that wanted to make comic projects with me, some that ended up happening. And it's like, I can't draw someone walking and then falling and then hitting their head in one panel. That's not how panels work.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I learned a lot about the visual language. I'm still learning a lot about the visual language. I remember one of my favorite McFarlane stories is sitting there in the office, and his office is so cool. Like, it's exactly what you'd expect. He's got the giant statues of Spawn and everything in there. It's just so cool. So I'm sitting there across from him, and it's like, well, what happens here? And I'm trying to describe the scene to him, and like every other word, he's just shaking his head at me like, nope. Like, what do you want? Because I had this idea, there was going to be a big new villain, and he's sitting behind this big oak desk, and it's just this bare desk, and he's sitting there with his hands folded, and he's just glaring at his minion or whatever. And Todd's like, so what is there to look at? Like, well, he's like sitting there, and it's like scary. He's like, no, it's not. Like, damn it, because I don't think that way. I'm a novelist. I've got I can just go on for pages and describe things, but nope, I've got a panel. Right. Make it count. Like, yep, it's tough. So tough.
Yeah.
Nothing but respect for everybody who does it.
And on top of that too, like, even if you did have him, sitting in this desk, sitting in a chair behind a desk or whatever, okay, great, he's sitting there. But and then what?
Yep.
And like that's the thing that would work great for a movie, right? Because you can move around the room. You can have the camera moving around. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can do cool things with shadows and light, and like you can see his lips moving and stuff. But in comics, like, no, man, it's a picture of a dude sitting in a chair.
Yep. That was one of the hard things. I'm like I said, I'm still trying to figure out my best way to do that. But I think from what I've gathered, I think a lot of writers in particular, because the artists already know this stuff, whether they've been taught or it's intrinsic or both, they get that, versus someone like myself who's a writer. We are used to seeing things cinematically and seeing a motion picture, and you're exactly describing it. That's a perfect example. Like, well, but on screen it looks like, oh, it's not a screen, right? Sorry,
Right. Yeah,
requires
And Todd, I mean, you said it's like jumping into the deep end. And Todd McFarlane is one of those guys that he's going to push back on you.
Yep.
If you go through any issue of any comic he's ever drawn, Todd's whole thing is, no, but it's got to look cool.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter what he's drawing; it has to look cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And cool can mean different things in different moments. But there's nothing in any of Todd's panels looks boring. There's always something to look at.
Yes.
So yeah, even people sitting in a chair, it's like, yeah, he's sitting in a chair, but it's a throne made out of garbage, and there's all these details, and there's smoke in the background, and capes flowing, and chains, and
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it exactly. It's just one of those things. I do think that writers ought to try their hand at it. There's so many different forms of writing, whether it's poetry or comic books or screenplays, and a feature film is different than a TV episode, which is different than and there's different types of TV episodes. Like, oh my, like it's just endless. And it's been, it's been fun and challenging to dip a little bit into each one of these. But they're all wildly different, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm working on a side comic project right now, and earlier today, in fact, my writer that I was working with was like, "Well, is there any way we could produce basically double what we're planning on producing?" I was like, "No, I physically can't draw that fast." He's like, "Oh, right, that's a legitimate problem too." Mm-hmm. So, yeah,
yep, there it is.
So Tom, I've known you forever, as we established, and I know that I know a bunch of things, but I'm going to throw things over to Stephanie to ask you any questions she has, because I know the answers.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Shoot.
I don't know if you had anything, if you'd thought ahead much, Stephanie, but I don't know, anything you want to know about Tom or Zero or Kickstarting or I mean, maybe we could explain what Kickstarter is if people don't know.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that.
Okay.
And then I'll ask my first question.
Okay.
We can start with Brandon Sanderson. Have you guys heard about this yet?
No.
Brandon Sanderson, very famous and successful fantasy author, and I don't know the entire story, but essentially decided, well, I'm going to do a leather-bound edition of this series of my books that's 10 years old or whatever, put it up on Kickstarter, and he was asking, I think, for $250,000 or something like that. It was going to be pretty serious. At last, and I haven't checked recently, but the last time I checked a couple weeks ago, it was something like $5.6 million that he has raised.
Wow.
For this thing. Yeah.
Dang.
And I haven't looked it up yet, but I think Todd McFarlane did the same. I don't know if it was for a book or if it was for the film, though. But he just ran a Kickstarter that may or may not still be going on that raised just ungodly millions of dollars.
His was for a new set of Spawn action figures. Is that
what it was? Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at it. I seriously considered doing it, and then I looked in my toy box, and I was like, I still have like 7 Spawn toys that just aren't doing anything. I don't need more of them right now. But they were seriously cool, like 2020 updates to the old 1994, I think, original Spawn figures.
Okay.
So,
but wasn't it was like millions of dollars that wasn't
it? Yeah, and same deal. He asked for something like $250,000. He was basically asking for production money, like pre-order for production money, and he ended up. I think it was if it wasn't the most successful action figure based Kickstarter, it's one of them.
Oh, it's got to be. It's absolutely got to be. So I saw that and I was like, well, okay, so that's interesting. Now, granted, Brandon Sanderson, very well established, very successful, and so he had a fan base that was going to kind of follow him. Obviously, McFarlane, big fan base that's going to follow him and do that kind of stuff. But those two in particular, I think, illustrate the point and the idea of like, listen, the industry in writing specifically had already changed, within the last, let's say, 5 to 8 years ago or so. I came in with my first novel in 2010, just before Kindle happened, for example. Like this, people were still unsure how that was going to play out. We're still kind of shaking it out, to be honest. And it was before crowdsourcing. And now crowdsourcing shows up and people kind of, work their way through it a little bit and try to figure out how it's going to work. And now it's settled, like Kickstarter in particular, very well respected website. You can trust it and people do really good work there. And that was kind of one of these ideas where it's like, well, but if you have a base, whether it's 10 people or a million people, can you take something to them and build this community around it instead of simply creating product and sending it to market and hoping to God that something works, you know? And that's one of the things that I think Kickstarter has done really well as an organization is foster that community idea. Like there's really, and I was shocked to learn it the first time that there are people who will just surf Kickstarter and find stuff they like and support it, like brand new fans out of nowhere, you know, which is great.
Yeah. That's
and
awesome.
so it's just an amazing thing that no Random House, no Marvel, no anybody can duplicate, I don't think. It has to be that, you know, boots on the ground kind of thing. And you know what? And it's, some of them work and some of them don't. I set a low bar myself for 0 because I was terrified for the most part.
Yeah.
But now that I know, like, okay, so here's the first rung on the ladder. Okay, so I've got some support. I know some people are excited enough and believe in me and or the book, because it can be two very different things. There's musicians I know, like Andy, you and I know musicians from back in the day who it's like, you know what, frankly, not my favorite music, but I love this guy. I'll support him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's cool. We couldn't do that before. And I think it's really, I don't know if democratize is the right word, but it's leveled the field for artists of all kinds, whether it's filmmaking or inventors, you know, whatever. To bring things to a group. And I always forget the guy's name. It's something Kelly, I think, is either his first or last name. I can't remember. But it was this idea put forth not too long ago called 1,000 True Fans. And the idea is if you have 1,000 true fans, you've got a career. You're good. And when you do the math, it's really easy. He's absolutely right.
Yeah, it's if you have 1,000 fans that will buy anything that you put out, basically, and it doesn't have to be the same 1,000 fans for everything. But if you can consistently get 1,000 people to pay for whatever you put out, there's a few webcomics I follow that have they're in that boat now, where like they're like, hey, we spent the year making these webcomics, and now we're going to put out our 50 or 100 or 300 page book or whatever, and will you guys buy it? And sure enough, every time they hit that they go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever, it's like, well, the first 2 days there's 700 backers or whatever, and it's because like whatever it is, it's like, yep, there we go, they've hit it.
And it's so cool that any of us can do that. Anybody anywhere with an internet connection can make this happen. Yeah. And I think, too, the other thing about it is particularly, I do a lot of teaching. Sometimes they're younger students, sometimes they're older, doesn't really matter. But I think it has helped me start to clarify a little bit more about what my goals are, because when you get started, I think, or at least for novelists, but I'm sure it's true for pretty much any of the forms, like you want the big publisher and you want the big push and all this kind of stuff. And it just is, there's only so much room. The NFL can only have so many quarterbacks at once, doesn't matter. There's eventually going to be this many every year, and that's it. And publishing is very similar to that. There's only going to be so many lead titles per imprint and so on and so forth. And when you look at something like Kickstarter, where you can say, wait a minute, I can do whatever my project is, comic book, film, novel, whatever, and get, 500 people or 1,000 people, let's say, to give me $5, dude, that's $5,000. Like I can stretch $5,000 a long time, particularly if I'm a poor artist,
right.
And it's just, I'm really enjoying getting into that process and learning more about it as we go. It's a really cool change that's happened to all of our creative fields, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Like you said, I don't know that democratize is the right word, but definitely giving anyone that wants to create the platform where there's no more gatekeeping, right?
Yeah, correct.
Like you said in 2010, you want to go to your big publishers because that was the industry. That's what you had. Amazon ebooks were like a thing, but it wasn't like, there weren't people making careers out of it.
Right.
And now there are many people making careers out of it, writing a lot of very strange books.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Kickstarter was around in 2010. It was, or around that, sort of in that time period. I know I was backing stuff in 2013, at the earliest. So yeah, like it's been great to see the world kind of change and be like, hey, you're not stuck going to the big networks or the big corporations. You know, like you can put your thing out and give it directly to the people that actually want to see it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm involved in several different writing associations, like the Horror Writers Association, and typically, you know, like we do Phoenix Fan Fusion every year. Of course, we couldn't do that this year, which was just a lot more depressing than I thought it was going to be. Like we really were looking forward to. We look forward to it every year, and so that just really hurt. But like, you know, for me, like I don't need to be Oprah's big choice. Like I won't say no. If she calls me up, I'm like, okay, sure, twist my arm. But until then, like I just want to go to like the Horror Writers Association where there's like 300 people or 500 people, and they're like, oh my God, are you Tom Leveen? Like, yeah, you know, like these really select groups where you can have influence and have those really hardcore true fans, you know, that is so much more exciting and accessible than just being that super big mega, you know, whatever. Like, cool, I wouldn't turn it down, but it's still cool to be able to have these smaller groups where everybody's there for the same thing, and that camaraderie and everything that we always get at con, which let's move on. God, I'm so sad. I'm so sad about con this year.
I get it. I had panels lined up for con because I've mentioned this on the show before, but I'm actually a part of a local lightsaber combat and choreography group, and we do performances at con. And so when we heard con wasn't happening, we were like, well, next year. Here's the show for next year.
Yeah, I'm sure I've probably seen you guys because, that's just, it's such a part of it. It's such a I don't know. I'm sad. Go ahead.
I must be the jerk here. I'm the only one that's like, oh, cool, a year off from Comic-Con. Great.
You're not the only one.
Okay. No. like don't get me wrong, I love going, but I've been going to Comic-Cons every year since 2005.
Yeah.
I missed 1 year because I was like just too sick to go. I was having problems standing up. It was so bad.
Ooh.
It was pretty rough. But yeah, like I've gone to, I can't even begin to count, right? Even if you figure one per year since 2005, that's 15. And a lot of years it was 3 or 4 or 5. So I've been to a lot of cons. So to have a year, like obviously I prefer if it was there, but hey, we can't have it right now. And you know, not walking around for 4 days on, you know, beef jerky and overpriced cheeseburgers. Like kind of okay with taking a year off, saving some money, and then, you know, once it's all safe, maybe even 2 years, depending on how things go, hopefully not, but, you know, saving some time, saving some money, saving some energy, and then coming back and hitting it hard and stuff, you know, when it's okay to do that. You know, obviously I miss seeing my friends. Like Tom, you and I hang out a lot at cons. Stephanie, I love going to all your shows and stuff, but like it's fine. Yeah. Anyways.
No, a lot of maybe not, I don't want to misspeak. I have heard from some creators who on the one hand are like, well, that's a big chunk of my year, you know, or my income comes from cons and whatever. But they're also saying, and it's kind of okay. Like exactly what you said, like to have kind of a year forced upon them of just staying home has not been the worst thing. So yeah, totally understand that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I know I do have some friends where, I mean, their lives is traveling from con to con to con, selling their art and stuff. And I feel really bad for them this year because they're just stuck at home and they can't do anything. And, you know, they're forced to rely on online sales, which are, I mean, it's better than nothing, but yeah, they're, you know, looking into unemployment and part-time jobs and stuff just to have any income right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing about kind of touching back on the Kickstarter thing a little bit is with the crisis that we're in right now, it's really forcing everybody to think outside the box and to go, okay, what are some other options? Like we were talking earlier or about to start talking about what are theater companies doing? Now in Phoenix, very few people are making any living doing theater in Phoenix. There's a handful, but not very many. But still, like, well, we had these great, fantastic, well-reputed companies like Stray Cat, for example, or Nearly Naked or whomever. It's like, well, damn, what are they gonna do? I don't know. And it's forcing all of us as creatives, I think, is to either throw in the towel and say, well, we'll see what happens next year, or go, okay, what the hell is TikTok? Let me see what I can do with that. Or what can I do with this technology? What can I do? You know, can we do outdoor theater? Like, I don't know, but it's, I think the creatives are the ones who I think are kind of spearheading this thing. And we're starting to, I think the quote unquote outside world is starting to recognize how freaking important we are. Like when you start taking the stuff away from people, it's like, yeah, you miss us, don't you? Somebody's got to illustrate that, dude. Somebody's got to do this computer art. Somebody's got to tell this story. And now it's gone. Yeah, remember that next time. You know?
Well, at the very least, the theater kids are all the ones that turn into movie actors, and there's no movies right now.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry,
Steph, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're
Oh,
good.
damn it.
It's okay. I'm just fumbling along anyway. No, in college, I took a class on experimental theater, and the professor that I had, he was a fantastic professor. He also directed the play that I was in at ASU. But one of the things he said in our experimental theater class was that artists are very, very important. And during pandemics or during crises or big elections or anything where the world seems to be on fire, artists are the ones that the world turned to. Like, if you look back in the 70s when everyone was like, you know, rioting against the Vietnam War, you'll get like a lot of songs, you'll get a lot of art, you'll get a lot of, you know, different varieties and styles that came from that. And I think right now with everything that's going on, even though the artists are struggling, when this starts to settle and things start to kind of become normal, the art is just going to fly off the shelves.
I think you're right.
And people are going to go to the theaters and sell at the chairs and everything.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. One of my best friends from high school runs a very, very large film festival. And they were, you know, and I was kind of able to watch them track their progress. Like first, like, well, we're just going to scale it down. Well, okay, now we're going to scale it down a little bit more. And now we're closed. And now we're staying closed. Okay, you know, and it was this terrible, you know, just one domino after the other. But yeah, like you said, you know, come next year or whenever this is, when we feel safe again, man, that thing's gonna blow up because you can't see your friends. I haven't seen my friends in months, and it's killing me. And Skype is good and Zoom is cool and whatever, but it's not the same.
No, it's not.
And I'm an introvert. I want to be home by myself, and I, you know, but we still, no matter. And this is true, you know, talking about all of our creatives and artists and everything, like I am 100% an introvert. I need to have time by myself to recharge and whatever else. But that doesn't mean I don't need people, and that I don't need people in those arenas, whether it's a comic book convention or a film festival or a band night at a, you know, coffee shop, whatever, anything like that, to just be around, you know, your tribe, your group, whatever. That's probably been, you know, apart from all the death and destruction, has been one of the things that's been so very difficult. And I think you're right. Once we're able to feel safe again, we're just going to be, you won't be able to stop us.
Yeah, exactly. Now I did have a question going back to your writing and everything. So like I mentioned before, I do a little bit of writing myself, and I've actually, in the past couple months, I've hit a serious writing block, and it's not because I don't know what to write next, like how the next chapter should sound or anything like that. I've hit it in a emotionally stressful level where people, like certain people have been reaching out to me asking me to do requests and everything, and I'm like, you know, at the time I was like gung-ho about it, and now I feel like I'm letting them down. I'm like throwing this guilt on myself, which isn't great. I guess my question would be is like, do you like, how do you deal with one, writer's block, and two, how do you deal with, you know, when people throw, like, do people throw requests at you like, oh, would you write a story about this or something? Like, how do you handle stuff like that?
That is a great question. So the first part, the writer's block, it depends, because if you are doing it professionally, if this is what your main source of income is, you don't have the luxury. You don't get to say, I have writer's block. Like, no, you have to turn your manuscript in, bro. So get to work. Having said that, though, and I can't remember, I always attribute everything I've ever heard to Mike Stackpole. I don't know if it's true or not. But somebody, several years ago, made a point of saying there's writer's block and then there's project block, which is this one thing that I'm working on. I just can't seem to make headway on it. So I'm going to shift gears and go to work on this other project or group of projects until the logjam kind of clears. And that for sure happens. I never have just one thing going on at one time. I've always got several pots boiling at the same time. Part of that is just the way my brain works, but part of it is also practical because, you know what, I sit down to write today and I'm going to work on my adult thriller. Well, that's not happening. Okay, well, I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to do my young adult sci-fi. And that's not working. All right, I've still got this over here that I can work on, you know? So having more than one thing to do can be good. Having said that, some other practical steps I think we can take to kind of break up that logjam a little bit are writing in a different place. That used to be easier back in February. It's not so easy now. But even switching from, you know, the home office to the kitchen, or the kitchen to the living room, bedroom, whatever, bathroom, doesn't matter, porch, somewhere physically different from where you normally write can be very good. And I guess this is why we're so screwed in Phoenix, because it's like 120 degrees out and like we can't even go outside. It's like normally I would say go to the park, but I can't say that to you because you would die. So don't do that.
Right in the pool with your waterproof iPad.
Exactly. And if you could do that, that would be super cool. Any kind of physical change, I think, is good for the mind to kind of kick the rust off a little bit. And in terms of, having stuff getting thrown at you, I mean, it does happen. It happens to professional writing all the time because, somebody called and they want to know if you're interested in writing for this, intellectual property. Do you want to work for this? Do you want to work for that? And there's always, something kind of cooking. And that's tough because, well, now you're in somebody else's world. So like you said, somebody's coming to you and saying, I need a story and it needs to be this. And you're like, I don't really care much about that, but okay. Or it's not the genre you would normally write in or whatever. That, I don't know. I find that to be sometimes easier for the same reason that comic book writing can be not easier, but it gives it structure. If you're going to write a comic book script, you know how many pages, you know X, Y, and Z, and you kind of have to color within those lines. Writing for somebody else, whether it's a private, somebody hiring you to do one specific thing, or if it's an IP or whatever, well, now I have some structure. Now I've got, a little bit of a box that I kind of have to stay in. And in a sense, that can make it easier. And I think for something like that, I would probably be more likely to rely on an outline of some kind. Doesn't have to be formal necessarily. It can be. It depends on how your brain works. But something like if I'm trying to get into this particular intellectual property right now that I'm hoping I can break into because it would just make my day. And if that happens, I'm pretty sure they're going to have very specific guidelines on here's what you can do, here's what you can't do, here's what you can write about, here's what you can't write about, and that in itself is kind of freeing because, all right, structure can be good in that way. So I think an outline of some kind is worth looking into, if nothing else. Yeah, I hope that helps. Did that help?
That definitely helped kind of get a bit of an idea. I think it's also just the stress of just being stuck inside and everything else that it's just kind of making me like, I've been writing for 3 straight months now. I don't want to write anymore for a while.
Yes, no, that's... And I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to touch on that as well because the type of quote unquote block that you're talking about is very different now than it would have been 6 months ago. Very different. It's time, I'm not doing nearly as much writing as I used to, but I'm also now learning like, okay, well, there's different ways I can manipulate myself to do it. Like, for example, so we've got 2 kids in the house and they get up early and it's just nonstop all day because they don't have childcare. So they're home and it's this whole thing. I'm not going to write anything from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. I'm not going to write anything from 9 to 12. Like, it's not going to happen. So if I'm going to write, I got to get up at like 4:30 in the morning before anybody else and try to nail out 1,000 or 2,000 words if I can. And when I do, it gets done. Like, that's, if I can make myself get into that habit, then it will get done. And if not, then the trick here, I think, and not that I'm good at it, so do as I say, not as I do. The trick right now in the circumstances we're all in is to try to give ourselves a little bit of space for that. I'm, again, terrible at that. But this is all, none of us have gone through this before. This is unprecedented for every single one of us. Even if it's happened in the past, it wasn't like it happened to our grandparents. Like, no, it goes back further than that. This is brand new. We don't know. We're doing our best. But again, I think that makes what you're doing, what I'm doing, what Andy's doing so much more important than it's ever been before, because now the world kind of needs us in that sense, you know?
Yeah. That is very helpful advice for not only me right now, but I think anyone who's listening who's hitting the same roadblock that I'm hitting and that other artists are hitting. So I think that's very helpful for anyone who's listening. If that helped you, say so on our social media. Atomic Monsoon on Facebook, Twitter, _ on Instagram, Redbubble, wherever.
Yeah. And there was, I don't remember when I first heard about this, but I remember hearing about a story, and I'm pretty sure it's not anecdotal. I think it really did happen, but there was a group of student ceramic makers, sculpting and whatever, and they split the group into two, and one group was supposed to make one really, the absolute best thing they could make, and the other group was supposed to make as many as they possibly could in the same amount of time. And the ones in the second group made stuff that was sort of quote unquote objectively better than the first group, because it was just like, just go and just get. It was content creation, like just as much content as you could possibly churn out. And in doing that, they came up with better stuff. And I think that would be another thing to do. It's like, say, you know what, the hell with it, let's go and just jump in and write crap and sing crap and draw crap until it's not anymore.
Yeah.
Might as well.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
No, that's good, because we have like 5 minutes left. So,
like, all my other questions were answered when we were talking earlier about the book and everything. I guess the only question I have is for those who are listening, Tom, where can we find Zero?
So Zero right now is available. The short link, the easiest way to get to it is bit.ly/Zero Kickstarter, capital Z, capital K. And then if you go to Kickstarter, and I'm sure if you look up Tom Leveen, last name is Leveen. There shouldn't be anybody else on there with that name, and it should be relatively easy to find. It will be under publishing, and then I think there's a young adult category, if I'm not mistaken, under the publishing main branch there, and you can find it there. Yeah. We were before we even started funding, the project was named A Project We Love by Kickstarter, so I was like, woohoo! And then I had to go to my Facebook groups and say, what does that mean? I don't even know. So, but it sounds like it was a good thing, so that's cool.
Yeah. I will say too, also, I did try bit.ly/Zero Kickstarter, and it didn't work because it turns out it is case sensitive, so you need the capital Z, capital K.
Yes.
But I also just Googled Zero Tom Leveen Kickstarter, and it came right up. So,
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty easy to find, as long as people can spell your name right, which they should be able to, because it's going to be in the episode description and probably the title of this episode as well. So if you're listening to us, you can just look at how to spell Tom's name.
And you're probably one of the few people who knows how to spell it correctly. So that's great.
Again, I've known you for going on 20 years.
I know.
So,
it's handy. It's helpful.
Yeah. And I have got a bunch of books with your name on them. So if I ever don't know how, I can just turn around and look. Yeah. Okay, Tom, where else can people find you online if they want to see more of your books or just read your thoughts about writing and process stuff in general?
So as long as you're spelling the last name correctly, most of my handles will be at Tom Leveen, all one word. The only real exception to that is my Facebook page, which is author Tom Leveen. But otherwise, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Those are the main ones. I would love some more YouTube subscribers. I'm trying to push more video content out there. Most of it's focused on writing, but I've got some other bits and pieces that I'm trying to get together out there, because that's a medium that I've been a fan of and been interested in since I was very, very young. So I'm trying to work some more on video there too, so that would be great. And then pretty much Amazon or any independent bookstore you can certainly order books from, which I encourage people to do.
Yeah. Definitely, everyone, if you are a fan of reading or listening, you got a bunch of audiobooks now too, right?
I do, yes.
Yeah, so if you like reading or just like listening to books, just look up Tom's stuff, man. There's a bunch of different genres, a bunch of different styles, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Obviously, support. I want to support my friends, but like I also don't make up lies about my friends' work. So
that's true.
If someone's work isn't good, I'm just going to tell them, yeah, I didn't like it, and I'm not going to have you on the show. And we have Tom on the show. So
sweet, yes.
Yeah. Cool, guys. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you both for having me. I appreciate it.
For sure, everyone. Thank you for listening. And as always, you can find us on our various social media platforms, Atomic Monsoon on Twitter and Facebook, and with the underscores on Instagram. We are not on TikTok. I'm afraid. I'm just afraid of that.
That's okay.
You can find some Atomic Monsoon merchandise on our Redbubble store. Thanks again to our friends at DefM Records. You can visit them at defmrecords.com, DEAFMRECORDS.com. Otherwise, we still have a couple minutes to fill.
Yeah.
Well, after that big build-up, like, we're out of time, and now we've got time to fill.
I thought that it was going to take longer. Turns out I'm too efficient.
Wow. Good job, Andy. How's the show going?
Done.
I mean, the show's going. We're still here.
Yeah. Then what now? How many years, Andy?
I was going to say.
Yeah, we're pushing 2 years. It'll be 2 years next month. Actually, in a couple weeks, it'll be 2 years since the first episode came out. So, yeah. Our audience is growing slowly, but growing.
Mm-hmm.
We have an audience. We have people that listen every week. Hello to everyone that listens every week.
Hello.
Not a lot of people interact with us on social media at all, but that's fine.
Well, it's a good listening. Like you said, it's a listening thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to do more of that too. I have not yet. I have accounts, and then I just haven't ever populated them, which is a bummer because I still love the format of podcasting and audiobooks and stuff like that. That's just one of my favorites. I grew up with that. So, yeah, but I get it. And didn't you do, you did a lot of recording at FanFusion too. Wasn't that kind of like a big, moment to gather a lot of content?
Yeah, so that actually wasn't for this show, as confusing as that may have been at the time. I was with Ryan Treasure, who's one of the hosts of Finding Your Frequency, also here on the Voice America Variety Network. If you find the Finding Your Frequency episodes from May of last year, there's more of me on there, and I've actually been on that show probably half a dozen times now.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I know, Tom, we had you here on Atomic Monsoon, I want to say last February. You were our first guest, actually.
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah.
I thought we did something, but I couldn't remember when.
Yeah. And then you were on at least one of those Finding Your Frequency episodes with Ryan and myself last May. So, yeah. Yeah. So y'all can post as well. I know.
Man, yeah, we're still reeling a little bit because there's so many people that we don't see except at con,
Right.
Yeah.
And just even thinking about being in Artist Alley and walking around and saying hi to people and like tracking down people. One of my big weaknesses was because they're artists, you never see their face anywhere, and I never can put the name to the art.
You never know.
Inevitably, inevitably, like Sunday evening would come, and I'd hear someone, like usually Andy, like, oh yeah, so and so, like, wait, that guy's here. Happened all the time.
I start thinking about your earlier in the weekend, I think.
Yeah.
Whenever conventions happen again.
Yeah.
But they will. They just have to. Otherwise, I can't even imagine.
All these cosplays in my closet that are just gathering dust, and all the ones I still haven't finished.
And on that happy note, we actually are out of time. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.